Hello.
Scott, super excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
What time is it in your world over there?
It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon here.
Okay. Do we have
Yeah.
a hard stop?
Uh, no.
Okay. I'll try to keep it as condensed as possible so that we can share this. I am so grateful for you joining me and cannot wait to I don't want to say pick your brain, but I definitely want to understand better about this whole concept around, well, how philanthropy has actually become organized crime. Maybe it was originally that way, and then it twisted around, and then we've got religion, and then we've got coming all the way full circle to, well, back to what your purpose is, which is freedom, right? Creating freedom and true freedom, not this perceived version that we think we are living in, which is definitely not real. So, folks, welcome to another episode of Lead Stronger Longer. We are going rogue. And this is a special series that I'm doing, inviting guests who are doing and who are involved with the One Great Work Network. Dot. Well, I'm not going to say it because I'm not sure what it is, but it'll be in the show notes. And my guest today is Scott Gordon. He is one of the content creators on that channel. He is also a very prolific creator of free Scientology information. And I'm super excited to dive in with him on topics galore. So let's start with a couple of things, if you don't mind, Scott. I always like to start with a mantra or a quote or a guiding principle that you lead with. What would that be?
After reflecting on that, leave every place, everyone better than you found it, I think would be my favorite. That's the one I aspire to. That's the one that's always inspired me throughout most of my life. Leave every place better than you found it. I know there's an original quote there, maybe every place, everyone, but basically the idea of putting putting more of yourself into something that improves the lives of others around you and improves conditions and situations.
I love it and I want to 100% agree with it. And at the same time, knowing your background, and we have parallel threads with regards to certain religious cultures and this concept that you've discovered along with those who avail themselves of anything with Mark Passio of solipsism, that there is no right and wrong. There is only someone's opinion of that. And that would then beg the question then, if you want to leave something better, so let's do some empirical evidence of what Bill Gates believes is leaving something better. It's by destroying and eliminating as many lives as possible. And then the Yuri, I can't remember his last name, but he wrote the book on Homo sapiens and how they're useless eaters, right? And so his way of improving the world is to get rid of the useless eaters or to make them become vegetables in front of a digital screen. And then there's all the gamut of that. So I would be very interested in knowing if you could unpack this a little bit more with your quote, using your mantra, using your guiding principle, how that relates to the world we're living in today and the gentleman that I just mentioned, so you kind of get the idea. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm very in tune with that because I part of my interests is a project I call Free Philosophy, which cuts even deeper than Free Scientology and really intersects with Mark Passio's work because Mark Passio is quite a philosopher. And so he unpacks uh, you know, the objective definition of evil, you know, uh, doing harm, uh, doing things against the rights of others, and others have inherent rights to be left alone and not to be intruded upon, um, or, damaged, hurt physically. Now, their objective morality is very hard to define and describe because there is a such thing as subjective morality. That would be what goes on between friends as agreements, right? So, um, if you can get enough people to agree on things, the bad guys have found out, you can call it good. Because why? Everybody agrees that this is a good law, but the law is actually damaging. It actually hurts people. So there is an objective morality, and we should recognize that and pursue that, even though it may be a little hard to define completely or to prove, prove out in terms of the science or something like that, right? So I think we're obligated um, to navigate that each ourselves, because it's not always clear cut. But we all know the difference inside. We call it a conscience. We all know the difference between right and wrong, and we can navigate on that basis. And we're not going to be 100% correct because we have individual viewpoints that may have trouble perceiving, may see things through a filter. We may think we're doing right when we're not. So we're obligated actually to do the inner work that gets at those filters and those distortions that prevent us from seeing clearly objective morality.
Okay, so you said a lot there. Overreaching is that there is the key right there, and that's each of us doing the inner work, but there's not a lot of recognition. I can't even imagine that Bill Gates does any inner work, or this Yuri character does any inner work, or who knows. I mean, I'm only pointing them out specifically because they publicly state these things that, it's an overpopulation and we need to we need to reduce the population, and that anyone would even take anything else that he says after that as something that would be helping them. That's on us. That's on us, right? Because he's said that in TED Talks. And anyway, all right, this is an important topic in this day and age, 2025, that this is even going on. But you have such a history. So I do want to take us back in your life of that history and understand a little bit more how you've come to be where you are, because I've read that you were at one time very much into, maybe you read the Communist Manifesto, maybe you were really into that concept of this, and there's a lot of groups that are like, this is important, this is the way to, right? Just as there's so much to this, and yet, okay, let me go back to objective and subjective, because right off, objectively speaking, objective morality, for most of us that have our wits about us, know conscience in our conscience, like you said, that to harm another is just, it's wrong. Now, if we're defending, right? So there's that. All my mind is thinking of all the things of Mark Passio, and I do not want to repeat anything he's saying because I think it's important that people go and study his work. So to bring this here, can you give us the overall picture that you have gone through to come to where you are in this understanding, and how you navigated that to come to this understanding, knowing that you have been through this Communist Manifesto and really were applying that. And then you've also seen, and I'd love to pull apart anything you're willing to share with regards to the deeper stuff around the Scientology and the specifically the criminal acts that you've observed that are very clear to anyone who sees what's going on as opposed to the facade. But Scientology is just an example of one of many. I mean, you could insert any religion or any, like the philanthropy. When I started this, what I took away from your bio was philanthropy and organized crime are basically they're so intertwined, and this and the thing with Scientology being a religion, and it's really actually extortion. And then yeah, okay. So I said a lot. I'm hoping that you can distill that and just go for it.
All right. Well, first of all, Scientology is a great microcosm because it's its own little world. They really insulate themselves from the outside world. And so you have this authoritarian culture that I have been able to extrapolate a lot of things that I learned in there with the larger society because we live in a world cult. And again, Mark Passio really lays that out very well. I have a lot of different variety of experiences. And so I'll try to put each one in a little nutshell and then progress forward and kind of explain how my worldview came together. I was raised in a pretty in a Christian environment, and the good thing was that I got exposed. We did lots of traveling, and I got exposed to the complete variety of Christian viewpoints from conservative to liberal and all in between. My dad in particular was sort of leaned to a fundamentalist version. He was a Bible translator. And so I grew up on the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana. So I was immersed in another culture. There weren't that many white people. And then in fourth grade, I went to Ithaca, New York, which was a complete culture shock for me. And so I was initiated into the American culture and kind of insulated from it before that. So I had some unique experiences there. I read lots of books about Native Americans and absorbed a lot of Native American spirituality and ideas early on. And then later on, those would come back for me. I really struggled to fit in. I was a very gifted, talented student, high IQ. Um, and we wound up for my high school years in Texas. And I got married very young, age 20. And we had a baby daughter at age 22 for me. And then that marriage fell apart. At that time, I uh, was in extremely poor health leading up during the pregnancy, leading up to the birth. And I got exposed to some literature about diet and self-improvement. So I was already somewhat attuned to, I was skinny and I wanted a more muscular body. And so I was already interested in articles of, both the natural diet and um, the diet for gaining weight, right? So I was already into self-improvement, but at first it was purely physical. I didn't know much. To me, spirituality was what I did in church on Sunday, and I didn't really understand much of it as far as spirituality, in itself. It was a nice environment for me. And I got to be in environments where there was international Christianity like in Norman, Oklahoma University, where people converged from all over the planet. So again, I got exposed to a wide variety of viewpoints there. As time went on, I wound up at the University of New Mexico and is sort of embittered at the divorce and the difficulty of making a living, in my early 20s and in supporting a family. I was your resentful student that demanded answers. And I wound up, getting exposed to Marxism. And so as a student and aspiring to understand the world and resenting the fact that I believed that a lot of evil was in our government, in our society, in our culture, I felt that the answer was to hit back at the rich, the bad guys that had control over society. So that was my, in my state of ignorance, That was my effort to do something about the world. Okay. So I actually read, and very few people I think have read and understood Das Kapital, which is Marx's greatest work. It's actually his first work. So if you want to know, Marx became quite an evil character, but in his young idealistic days, he would actually adhere to science. And that book is actually quite uh, I wouldn't say recommended, but if you're going to read Marx, that is his best book. And he basically proves with mathematics that capitalism is eating its tail. So, he was right about that. He was wrong, I feel, in his solutions. And for he basically was an agent. His uncle was a billionaire of the day. And he was basically an agent sent in to destroy anarchism because anarchy was quite a movement in those days, and take over socialism because socialism was at that time a wide variety of movements, just basically workers' rights, improving conditions. What ended up happening in our country and in Europe, the slow way. So, yes, I was involved in that for about 2 or 3 years. I joined the Communist Labor Party, and I got a glimpse into my first, not my first, I would say my first cult was maybe fundamentalist Christianity, but here's my second cult, and that is Marxist communism. And that lasted 2 or 3 years, and I was became disillusioned with their um, well, the party disbanded, the wall came down in Berlin. That it was all in those years. And it just didn't resonate with me anymore. And I started reading a book about it was called um, I don't remember the name of the book, but it was a book that reflected a sort of past life Christianity, where Rudolf Steiner, and it was written by Trevor Ravenscroft. It's a Spear of Longinus or Spear of Destiny. That's the name of the book. And it had quite an impact on me because it kind of opened my eyes. And I had been a vegetarian for, since my daughter was born, at that time around 5 years. And I think my chakras were starting to open up. And when I read this material, I had quite a spiritual experience, and I felt that I was a spiritual being for the first time. Before that, it was like there was the Bible. It has good ideas and some authoritarian stuff that I didn't resonate with, but I just didn't feel like I was a spiritual being until this point, other than music. I was also a musician, and music helped me get into that space that I felt the magic. But here, for the first time, I was reading a book and gathering, uh, some ideas that, hey, I was a spiritual being. That sense of deja vu that I had only experienced, my experimentation with psychedelic drugs for a couple of years in my late teens. That all started to make sense outside of the drug paradigm that, hey, I'm a spiritual being. And that was actually before I got involved with Scientology. I knew nothing of Scientology at the time, but within a couple years, I had read the Dianetics book and I was joining the Scientology group. And I was already in that space where I felt I was a spiritual being, that there were answers, that there were solutions that were, you know, that Marxism was just materialism and didn't acknowledge a broad spectrum of the human experience that was very important. And that launched me into a much bigger world. And so I did get involved with Scientology. I was in staff for 16 years. At first, it was in Dallas, and then I I saw the evidence of corruption beginning to set in management in the early 2000s. And I realized that I had spent 11 years celibate and really pouring myself into Scientology, and I got a lot out of it. I got a lot of wisdom, knowledge, and inner work. The inner work was great for me. Not everyone had the great experience I did. I acknowledge that, but I did. And I learned a lot about myself. But at the same time, in moving up my awareness, I was looking at the organization. It's like, wait a minute, there's something that doesn't, you know, there's cognitive dissonance all over the place. And I was actually in the Office of Special Affairs, which is the notorious um, one element of it is what they're infamous for is the dirty tricks. I I would I had that on my as part of my even my job description. It was euphemized as information officer, which is basically intelligence officer and keeping a watch on society and people and doing all kinds of reports and implementing the will of management. And more, the will of management was very harmful, and I got away with it a few times by just saying no, or just by not doing anything. But it was beginning to go against my grain. And because some elements of that were positive, being the hero that was guarding my local organization, keeping this whole operation safe, that people could go into sessions and they're doing their inner work, and I was one of the protectors. So, there's all that goes along with that makes you feel ego wise that you're doing something. And I know that I was doing some good. um, I'm not beating myself up over that. So I found a Costa Rica. I finally got on the dating lines, and I found a girlfriend in Costa Rica who was a Scientologist, and so that kind of extended my career because at that time they were just starting the ideal organization buildings, and that was all about making us uh, become more, you know, making everything look like we were a uh, you know, we would attract
Policy.
money, businessmen,
Yeah.
a higher, higher spending clientele. And that not only went against the grain, but I recognized it went against what L. Ron Hubbard, the founder, had envisioned. And so I was about to just kind of exit quietly. And then I found this Scientologist girlfriend who became my wife. We married, and I decided to move to Costa Rica because she couldn't move the other direction. And they were supposed to become the big ideal organization of Central America. And I was enticed again with all the promises, and I was observing that management was far away and that everyone here was just following, L. Ron Hubbard writings, and there wasn't any of these weird orders coming down the lines and things like that. So it gave me a renewed but it didn't take long. Within a few years, people who had trained at the head organization were coming back and were acting just like the authoritarian Sea Org members that run Scientology. And so that was no fun anymore. And so it took me a while to exit. And this time when I did, I didn't go very quietly because I have a whistleblower instinct. I was angry at the cognitive dissonance, at the authoritarianism, at the human rights abuses. I experienced it myself on the ship. They had my passport, and I was held a few days, and I was a school teacher. I was supposed to get home and teach. So all this stuff converged, and I couldn't help but, even though I was posting under another name, I couldn't help but just elaborate on how bad the church was. And these stories helped Office of Special Affairs connect me to the underground, because I was trying to get people out, right? So this underground movement, um, uh, that could be another long story, an interesting story, because they had me on their e-meter trying to figure out if I was connected to any of this stuff, and I held my ground. And that was a big deal for me, and not a lot of people coming out of Scientology can say that. But at some point, I just made the decision that if this is a meter that measures the truth and whether I'm telling the truth, I need to have total integrity, and I'm not going to reveal names of people that are doing good things. And so I actually passed with flying color, not with flying colors. It was rocky, but I got through it finally at the end. I got my pass on it. And that was but it wasn't long before they caught up to me and they expelled me from the church. And I was already, since my wife already knew that I was not a good Scientologist anymore, and that was going to impede her progress up to the highest levels, she was already making moves to divorce and everything. So that was kind of tragic. I had to start my life all over again. And that was around 2012. And so just a couple more things to kind of wrap up the life history. Um, I was subject to some church harassment, but it's always hard to tell, because the whole thing is covert. They do it through private investigators. I could never tell for sure whether all these things that happen at once, any of these things were assisted by covert operations of either the church or the deep state, because I found out that the deep state has been the angel on the shoulder for them for a long time, and that that the deep state has had quite an interest in Scientology, not just as a cult, but as a international organization that they can draw data from and get reports, saving them a lot of time. It's like the State Department of the United States. It's not everyone in it is CIA, but the CIA gets so much data from State Department employees, right? They get to see all their reports. Scientology is sort of a subgroup of the deep state, and I even sometimes call it the sixth military organization. We have Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and then we have Scientology, because it's a paramilitary organization that's been used to gather data and to further agendas. And we saw that in the lockdown. The lockdown was, nobody complied with the lockdown better than David Miscavige and Scientology. I mean, everyone was wearing masks, spraying the tables. And when they did open back up, and in the Scientology Church of L. Ron Hubbard, you would not close the organization for one day. You would find some way. Maybe you would be careful about a virus, but you wouldn't shut down. So anyway, that's a little off the topic here. But
No, it's
to get back,
100% on topic, and I really
oh, good.
appreciate you sharing that. It's fully on topic, and overall, what I've heard you say, and I can just see this. Thank you for sharing all of that. Is there is an underlying fear that is put forth, just like they did with the pandemic, just like they did with, and that you can see the arms. It's the same thing that's now that I'm understanding this and being able to understand from this total paradigm shifting concept that Mark Passio has put forth, and that everyone really it's on their own journey, on their own time, should definitely find their way through this information, because it's of course thinking for yourself. So the biggest thing that I heard you say, though, is that it comes down to, again, you being able to own you, control your own thoughts, no matter what's going on. And even when those orders were coming down and you saw order followers and you saw it coming down, you knew, and you were able to stand in that space with your own concepts. And thank you for sharing. I personally have benefited from the technology in some of the books that I have read and studied, and I did train very high level in the bridge of Scientology, and I have helped tens of thousands of people as a result, because I was on staff and doing and putting many, many hours in. And, it's a different thing when you're an auditor because you're there literally, that's what you're doing to help, unless you're made to be not made to be, but security checker, right? I first was trained as a senior security checker and a false purpose rundown. And when you understand that, uh, and you understand that it's helping relieve the burden, just like in confession, fabulous, amazing tool. But then when it's used as a weapon against you, that is when we know that this is no longer what it is and what the purpose of freedom is with regards to, call it Scientology, call it Catholicism, call it CIA. Now you have now completely inverted the whole concept of trying to free someone and made it into now you're actually burying them and creating a, they call it a slave, but you're imprisoning them. And that's exactly what I see. So it can be as simple as that to understand that. And I love that you broke down the microcosm of the culture, and that what we know of as Scientology is a microcosm of that. And it's no offense to those who find the tools of Scientology useful. I think it's very great. I mean, look at my books. I have countless books, and if I get one nugget out of one of those books, I'm very happy. If I can apply it to improve myself, improve my family's life, improve, right? And so I think that that's where we are so on the same page with this. A couple of things that you said, I wanted to backtrack on a
Could I
teeny bit. Yeah.
I was almost done with that last thing that would lead into how I got into Mark Passio. So a number of things just converged all at once. I had worked really hard, and like I said, I had to start completely over again in my life. And I worked very hard and saved up my money, and I bought a fixer-upper house in Pueblo, Colorado, and I was moving there. And I had also had a little bit of a family inheritance in that I put that into a rental property in Colorado as well. And all of a sudden, the rental property burned. My car got stolen, and all this happened within the span of a couple of weeks, and it got me to the lowest point in my life. And um, somehow, at that moment, or at that moment of time, somebody shared a Mark Passio video, and I found in Mark Passio some of the things we've alluded to earlier about the moral relativism that creeps into any religion, and particularly it creeped into Scientology. I mean, you have Tom Cruise out there saying the truth is what you say it is, or and he's misquoting L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard said, "In Scientology, what I say is the truth is true for you if it's true for you." Right? So you got Cruise out there, distorting it, possibly deliberately, on behalf of the deep state. And so the Mark Passio clarified the missing elements of philosophy that Hubbard never really got into. He didn't go into the gender of natural law, the male and female aspects of the personality. I think he wanted to avoid psychology, but he went too far the other direction. So he scrapped things that were very important knowledge. And so I filled in that missing knowledge with Mark Passio's teachings. And as well, the confirmation, I feel like in Hubbard's early axioms that he issued as the laws of Scientology, he says good and bad are a matter of opinion in one place. And I feel that he changed his position on that. The fact is, though, that he never went back and corrected those axioms. And as a result, Scientologists, a lot of them use that. They've gravitated toward a new age interpretation, and they've used that, especially the modern church, because they're involved in financial crimes and stealing from each other, as they do when they make you buy all these materials out of your account that you had for services, and now it's being stolen. So with all that, there's an epidemic of moral relativism, and we know that leads to Satanism, which is just like inversion of everything right. And so it's only a matter of time before Scientology goes off the cliff unless they have a real bona fide truth commission. David Miscavige is gone, and they really bring people back to, they could reform that because Hubbard left enough good things that it could be reformed. As far as I'm concerned, it's unreformable at this point. And so I pulled out all of the good things I could find into free Scientology. And that was helped greatly by my connection with Mark Passio, because I was able to correct some of the philosophical mistakes or omissions and put it back in. And then lo and behold, I find that the bridge, which is the steps of inner work that you do in Scientology, is by and large mostly correct through the heart of it, through the beginning of it. And it's a wonderful thing for freedom movement people or anybody to just check out. I would recommend going to my work, but Hubbard's work is the direct stuff, and I admit that. And that's his stuff is of high value because he was one of the only beings that we've had, other than maybe like Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist, who really devoted his life to trying to understand what the mind was and how you improve it. And most of his stuff is pretty good in that direction, and it can be used for good. So I recommend people, my work is a merger of freedom and truth into the inner work. And I also acknowledge and recognize that there are other branches of inner work, such as Jungian psychology and things like that, that are also very helpful. So I'm not a monotone as far as Scientology. I'm trying to make Scientology useful and available to people outside the church so that they don't have an authoritarian organization over them as the only option for availing themselves of some very positive methods. So that's how I ended up in the freedom truth movement. I was always interested in freedom and truth from the early 90s when I first read Bill Cooper's A Pale Horse. I got to read that the day before it was released because my fiance at the time worked at a bookstore and she had an advanced copy. So I was one of the first to read that. That was back in 1992. And it just initiated me into, and Bill Cooper was a naval intelligence officer. L. Ron Hubbard was. And this is where later on I was able to piece together the likelihood that Hubbard had deep ties to the deep state and that he probably, I would say, went rogue in terms of seeing what he had that could actually, get mankind out of an authoritarian satanic pyramid that we're in. But he was ambivalent about that. He wasn't completely, as he would say, intention is cause. His intention wasn't completely aligned there. He was compromised. And so you can see that, when you really look at his life and even when you analyze the technical developments through the years. And that's been my project as well, to make available back to the Scientologists that are still interested, as well as the freedom movement that expresses an interest, how to piece this all together, how the inner work has been sequestered from the use of mankind, and it was sequestered in a cult, purposely. And so we need to unpack it, and we need to take a look at what is inner work, how do we do it. Mark Passio has some tips from ancient practices, which are good. That's another branch of the inner work. But I'll just say this last thing and then we'll go on. The unique feature of Dianetics and Scientology is that you're given a direct opportunity to close your eyes and relive an experience, which is the most direct inner work there you could think of. It's like, did bad traumatic things in your childhood affect you the rest of your life? Well, did you know you can go back and look at it and get some relief from it in doing so. And that's Dianetics in a nutshell. And Scientology, I don't think Hubbard ever stated this or anybody in Scientology ever did, but I wound up labeling the the general processes that help people kind of climb this bridge of awareness. I label that repetitive Socratic questioning. And I think that's a breakthrough in understanding that the reverse of hypnosis, which is pounding something in. 2 + 2 = 5. 2 + 2 = 5. And eventually you believe 2 + 2 = 5 because that is the way mind control works. Well, Scientology is the reverse of that. And this is why it breaks the hypnosis. It's asking, does 2 + 2 = 5? Thank you for your answer. Does 2 + 2 = 5? It's a reverse of that. And nobody has really, although Hubbard said we're not about hypnosis and we're actually de-hypnotizing the person, to my feeling, he never really explained that. He just kind of left it in mystery. And I finally decoded that that's what we're doing. We're reverse engineering the mind control by these types of processes. And so I have a whole website devoted to repetitive Socratic questioning, as it could be taken by people and used in itself to just kind of get into areas that they want to lightly cover. Psychologists are concerned about trauma, that you don't re-traumatize a person, and I would agree. And even in the organization of Scientology, we don't throw people into what we call engrams, the traumatic experiences. We do things that prepare the way. And so what I found is that this repetitive Socratic questioning actually does unpack the trauma piece by piece, little bit by bit. So it's a way of taking somebody who's been scarred by trauma and doing a very light therapy over a long period of time, rather than jam them into something that they just may not, be able to extricate themselves from easily. And so those concerns of the psychologist are satisfied in this therapy. So we have this Scientology therapy and Dianetics therapy, and we can take it out of the authoritarian organization. And that's been my project, where I see Mark Passio releasing all of the outer work, the knowledge about that has been kept occulted over the centuries. I feel that some of the discoveries that are occulted into a religious cult is taken out as inner work, and the subjective, what is a mind, what the things about a mind, how to understand the mind, and a lot of those things. And so I view my project is completely complementary to Mark's work. And I can only aspire to, if I did 1/4 of the quality and quantity of teaching that he's done with my inner work project, I would be like very, very happy, because his material is high quality. And I appreciate having that as a mentor,
No
as well.
question. Yes, absolutely. He has set the bar, and I so appreciate everything that you're sharing. I just want to be really clear for folks that uh, a lot of what the experience that can happen is this gaslighting. And what is gaslighting? It's basically emotional and mental abuse to make the victim feel that they are crazy. And
Yep.
I think that that's one of the strengths of what the deep state, call it Scientology, call it deep state, call it whatever. And so you want to be really mindful of that in anything you approach. And so the work of knowing yourself, while Scientology has tools, psychology has tools. I will tell you, I have studied tens of thousands of other modalities and books, and continue to study once I realized that there was not only one way. And I think that as a result, I now know that there is the way is your way for sure. And you can be helped by going through a long process. I find that Scientology is a much longer process. I can help clients within 5 minutes heal things. They'll walk out of my studio and something that had been going on for 50 years and they've tried everything from hypnosis to Scientology, they walk out and it's gone. And those are tools that I will just say, whether it's emotional freedom technique, that's free. Anyone can do that. Whether it's the original source of that was Roger Callahan's work, thought field therapy, and that is very valuable, useful work. Anything from, I really love EMDR, rapid eye therapy, any of this, because we're neurological beings. So we want to make sure our physical body, as well as the emotional body, as well as the mental body, as well as the spiritual body, are all getting cleaned up. Because you can go and do Mark's work, and if you're not processing and digesting and moving the limbic system, it's definitely going to light things up in the brain. So you have to look at it from a holistic approach. I think it is very, very important. Whether you avail yourself of Scott's work, I highly recommend going and checking his stuff out because he'll break it down. I think I saw some of the things that you took some things from basic auditing of, and auditing is just listening, right? And self-analysis is an option where you can actually do that for yourself and recall the moment you had breakfast. Feel that. I think that's a great practice to do as a regular basis because then that helps you get more into present time. Each of us needs to be in present time, leading our life from this present moment. And then when something is triggered, you take one of the tools, whatever that tool is that's effective for you, and you use it. You avail yourself of it. And that is what we have to do. This is the inner work, but it's also the outer work, because as we do the inner work, we are reflecting in our outer environment and the world. I love that you brought up Bill Cooper. Wow. When I read that book, it was on my grandmother's shelf. It was so bizarre to me because I wasn't even 20, and I realized, and the other thing she had on her bookshelf was None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And I was reading these books and I wasn't sure if it was fiction or what was really going on. And you can't not know now. You can't unknow what you know when you read that, and you just look at things differently. But we give power to the organizations, to the deep state, to the people, to the person, to the thing, to the book. And we always have to remember that it has to come back to us being responsible for what we are assigning power to. One of the great mentors that I have discovered since, and I think I found him during COVID, was doing some like exit the matrix type of work, right? John Rappaport is another one I highly recommend. If you don't know John Rappaport, Scott, I want to introduce you to him and his work because.
Yes, I followed him for quite a while. Yeah,
Okay, fantastic. So
and
you
he actually
understand.
has the background in Scientology as well.
That's
People
right,
don't
the
know
Jack
that because he's not
Parsons and
open
all
about
of
it.
that. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
I think that you probably have a book in you for sure that would be so interesting to read. And in terms of the two places, I know I'm going to put all the free Scientology pieces, those there. And what that means, it's interesting because I didn't realize it until you were describing that you were actually helping get folks out who were imprisoned there, high level executives who get put in the hole, as they call it, right? And are brutalized. And so I don't know that firsthand. I've only seen the end results of it. And I appreciate what you have done. My heart hurts for those who are still suffering and all those who have suffered at the hands of just completely unnecessary and so many turning a blind eye and completely, going and writing the knowledge reports because you're suppressive because it's like, look, folks, you need to wake up. We've got to wake up, right? To to really do what Hubbard, I believe, was trying to do, like you said, is that it is freeing the spirit, freeing the being. But if your body is trapped and your mind is trapped, that you're not going to do too well. And so, yeah, I would highly recommend reading the Dianetics. I'd go back and read the original stuff. I don't know what they've done to change things, but let's move on because I have a couple more questions and I don't want to keep you too long. But you talked about Rudolf Steiner, and he is also someone I admire. And when I started reading about that, it's quite esoteric. And since you've gone deep down that rabbit hole, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about how you were inspired, influenced, and how that's influenced the work that you do now.
Okay, well, basically, Steiner was a uh, he had done all the levels of Freemasonry. He was an expert in the occult, and he had basically, but he was also a very strong Christian, and esoteric Christian. In other words, he didn't take it all literally, but he really embraced that view. Um, the thing that I got of the highest value from Steiner was his cosmology of evil, because that's been part of my study as well. And that had a big impact on me at the time. He divides evil into two categories. One, spiritual evil, where the either the being practicing it, it's kind of the Lucifer side of things. And that is that evil is conscious and aware of the spirit, but is willingly doing its own thing, very individuated from interacting with others socially and being a social personality and contributing and exchanging. So that whole idea where and a lot of our world leaders are infected with this, and a lot of the whistleblowers will tell you it's Luciferian at the top. And this is the idea that we're better than they are. We have the knowledge, they don't. And that's the pyramid of power that we,
So let's do two things really quickly because you
yeah,
mentioned Satan before and then you mentioned Luciferian. These are concepts.
their
Can you
concepts.
just
Yeah,
make sure you define this
yeah,
for folks? They're concepts. We're not literally talking about the devil and
right.
fallen angel. It's literally a
Yeah.
concept and an energetic concept. And if you can just unpack those two, because you mentioned it before, and you weren't talking about a person, but Satanism as an inversion of good. It's basically, yeah. So I want your take on that, if you could.
Yeah, these are archetypes, and so I think it'll become clear when I explain the other archetype. Is he called it Ahriman, which is an ancient god. Uh, you could also call that Satan. Eatris has been another name thrown out, but it's basically devotion to materialism, and it's kind of the what the Christians see in and so a lot of them do take literally that this is a being itself, and it might be. But what I would point out is that all beings are basically started out equal, and that we all have different roles and responsibilities and different, but we don't need to take this literally. What we need to do is see it as an archetype. So you have two forms of evil, and one is a spiritual aware evil, and one is the dulling of awareness into total materialism, which is actually what they have in mind for us. You're right. So they practice Luciferianism, but they want us to be Satanists, fighting each other for scraps, being selfish. And Mark Passio really goes into that in his material. Basically, the devotion and worship of the ego or the self is what we're talking about when we describe Satanism. And so it's an inversion. So anything goes. There's no, you know, morality required, and or it's moral relativism if there is any. And so it's just the dog eat dog, um, every man for himself, kind of idea that you will find if you go to Satan religions. Of course, there's some new ones on the horizon, and they're mixing libertarianism in, and I think that's an operation to confuse the freedom movement. That you can't be, for those who think they can't be Christian and freedom oriented, or for those who, they have something for everybody. So basically, what I got from Steiner is he did a beautiful job of creating a kind of a cosmology in which there are two, not just one, two adversarial archetypes working against good. One is a, knowledge-based Luciferian, the light bearer, and the other one is the crush everything down to materialism, no spirit, you know. So that's what I got from Steiner. And, I've heard the Waldorf schools are a great idea and a great implementation. They follow the Steiner thing. I've heard, I know I have some friends that are involved in the groups. Funny thing, I tried to get involved in the groups and I couldn't really connect up or find anything. That was just before I found Scientology. So by then it was too late. But yeah, I got a lot out of that. He's quite a knowledgeable person in the realm of the spirit. And I get it that a lot of people, writing about spirit is like writing about art. It's an invisible force and it's subject to a lot of opinions, and I don't like cosmology either. Somebody telling me that, you know, there's some story that explains why we're the way we are now. That might be, but I want to find out about it on my own. So I try to minimize cosmology in my free Scientology work and in everything I do in free philosophy. But I do understand that you have to at some point develop the fact that we've lived before, that we're here on this planet, that there must be some, I love, I'm sorry, mute button. Okay, so there must be some forces that converged, that some history that we have as a race and as spiritual beings that have us in the condition we're in now.
Could be for sure. Okay. The biggest thing that stood out for me is this operation to confuse. And I think that that is something that is going to be my biggest takeaway, and that I want to encourage everyone to hear in this, is that there are operations to confuse. And when you understand that datum right there, and you can start utilizing that datum to observe what's going on around you and question. This is a really key piece. And then as you question, be okay to read about and learn about without having to read and learn as if it is gospel truth and you're trying to check something off a checklist. And I say this from a place of deep compassion and from a place of humbleness that I sought in every book. And I don't know if it was with Scientology, but in everything that I was reading, I wanted the answer. I wanted the truth. I had to have the truth. I wanted it. And I was looking for it. And when you are looking for something and you want it to be the truth, you're going to make it the truth because you're putting power towards it. And that's often where you will find yourself actually coming back into destroying yourself from the inside out. So remember, this comes back exactly what Scott said from the beginning. It is the inner work. Each of us have to do our own inner work. And what that looks like for you is going to be unique and different. You do want to have a guide. You want to have the right support. I've said this for years. I wrote this in my Finding Joy Beyond Trauma, that support is really crucial, that you are clear on what that support is. For years, I thought Scientology was the key support, and it was actually the catalyst that started the self-destruction from the inside out, from someone who was supposed to be supportive. And that was at 17 years old, and it took until I was 35 to actually unravel that self-destruction mechanism that was set in place. Now, was it them that did it? No, it was me, because I accepted that as truth, right? And this is where we have to do, this to me is now me coming to understand the one great work. And that Scott and you along, I mean, I just I looked at it recently, and there's just so many people. And this is what we have to understand. It's so many people there because there's opportunities. You don't have to do every single one of them. You need to follow your path. I found Will Keller, his stood out, something that his was. And so I'm talking to him, and we're going to do a series for a bit. And then I saw Scott, you actually reached out to me, and we're in a place where you could answer some of my questions that I was coming up against with regards to my own beliefs around Scientology and how they were literally crumbling as I was going through the podcasts of What on Earth is Happening with Mark Passio. They are
Mhm.
very difficult podcasts, or they were for me. And
Wow.
I've observed for others very, very difficult, very challenging when you have very fixed beliefs, which I did.
Mhm.
And even with that, and having so much knowledge, so we cannot keep looking at a book and saying, that's the answer. This is the answer. Mark is the answer. Scott's the answer. Stefan is the answer. No, you are the answer for you. And until you get that, we won't make it out of this. And that's the truth. And it reminds me, Scott, do you remember this quote? Hubbard said, when there will only be peace on the earth when we can fully trust each other. Now, if we take that and look at this concept that we are all one, we have to start with ourselves. So let's start by trusting ourselves and allowing the feelings that are coming up in a safe way, in a healthy way, with the right support. And you're going to have to do the work. Then you can start telling the truth and trusting yourself again. And that has been my journey, and is my journey to this moment and to every day, and will be for the rest of my existence. And hence I bring guests on like Scott, and we will probably have Scott on again. But I because there's some things that you have written and put out, by the way, folks, all of his stuff that I've seen free. So it's not, you don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars. If you want hands-on help with him, I'm sure you can exchange, and there's compensation between uh, the individuals who want to work together. But imagine you could just go start working and doing the work in a healthy way, right? Keep your body healthy, eat good food, get sunshine, breathe. You mentioned that, Scott. So there's so much we can unpack on here, but I've got 3 pages of notes already, and then I have to synthesize this for myself. The forces converged, in understanding that there's more definitely to unpack with regards to maybe Rudolf Steiner's concepts, not so much going into his work, but how it plays out. And I mean, there's just so much. I have so many questions, and yet I do feel like there's been key answers. And wow, thank you so much. Scott, is there anything that I haven't asked you during this time that you would like to share that you feel is important to get out?
I can't think of anything at the moment. I'm sure there is, but
Okay,
I
okay,
feel
well,
like
cool.
we've had a great discussion.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
tremendous, and definitely opened quite a few little doors and windows, and so
I
exciting.
guess the last thing I could leave people with is, um, the inner work and the outer work share something in a key thing in common. And in both cases, we are comparing the objective truth, the objective world of truth, in with what our own thinking inside. Okay. In the case of the inner work, we're comparing what we run around thinking happened with what actually happened by going and taking a look at it in a new unit of time. And by that comparison, some of the falsities that we false ideas and beliefs start to fall away, and we become more resonant with truth in the outside world because we have more truth inside. Because trauma is not accurately um, it's not accurately expressed or remembered. That's why it's trauma. It distorts things. It's a force that has acted against us in the past, and we sort of need to relive it and kind of straighten it out. So the same process goes on in the outer work. Uh, we're trying to get different angles, different viewpoints on things until we can arrive at a conclusion. And even then, we keep that conclusion open to modification if we're really honest. And if we practice honesty with self and honesty with others, and then honesty with how we view the world, we start to align. And once we start to align, we start developing, or recovering our purposes, our true purposes. And that starts to um, just sort of expand, expand into I'm helping more because I'm more on target, right? I'm more on target because I have aligned more with truth. So what Mark teaches is not different. It's just it's a sort of a different facing as to whether you're facing out or facing in, the inner work or the outer work. The work is the same, is to get at the truth.
Yes, absolutely. It's just it's shining the light on a different area at a different angle, and you're able to see it in a different way. And that perspective shift makes all the difference. Being
Yeah,
able to understand the beliefs you've made about it and what is recorded in your quote unquote DNA, right? What's recorded on our strip of energy that manifests in this physical form, and that's something that I make my life's work because I love the physical body and the physical. I love this dimension. I love playing out the emotions and the physical and all of that. It's delightful for me. And, uh, and at the same time, I am absolutely focused on ensuring that suffering is not put forth as a result of this beautiful experience we get to have. The unnecessary suffering that's made because of immorality is unacceptable, and I say, not on my watch.
right.
Scott, thank you so much for your work. I'm going to put all those links that you have in the show notes. We'll get this out there. And then what I'm doing with Will Keller is live. We're going to be doing live so that we can actually have folks come and ask questions live. And we'll be doing that on a weekly basis. I wonder if you would like to do a couple of those with me as well, where we could come on live and folks could actually ask questions as they go through this journey. It's not about debate. It's about asking the questions of ourselves. We don't need a debate. That this isn't the venue for that. This is really literally about, okay, I'm looking and doing the inner work. What tools could I use? And we could unpack them a little bit of that. If you're interested, and folks, if that seems interesting, please make sure you comment, like our videos, share our videos. We want to get more of this out there, and we want to make it so that it is not an operation to confuse, but an operation to, and actually, I'm going to have to clear up that word, operation, right? Operation, interesting. If you're operating that way to confuse, I mean, right in the whole language piece, right? So
Sure.
what our intention is here, at least mine with Lead Stronger Longer and the folks that I bring on, is to unravel the confusions. I have them myself, and I'm unraveling them every single day. And it has been an interesting process, not always pleasant. Most of it has been quite excruciating. And to that juxtaposition of that incredible pain, once I stopped blaming myself or making myself wrong or bad because I didn't know better, right? You cannot do that. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. Now we move on and we get present and we tell the truth and we're like, yeah, I'm sorry. Self, I am sorry, right? We do the work because that's what we've got to do. And I think we need more of us supporting each other in this healthy way, not making you wrong or pointing fingers. So there we go. Scott, thank you again. I always ask, what's your favorite book or like book recommendations? But I have literally like 4 books that you've said. And so are there any other books that you're like, I've got to share this? Tell me.
This is the book for the age. Um, this one just
Say that out loud
gently,
for our folks
yeah,
that don't
this
see a
is the
visual.
most dangerous superstition by Larkin Rose, and it just so gently and so directly takes apart a very insidious, long-standing, I mean, thousands of years, false idea that we carry around with us that feeds authoritarianism, that feeds I'm better than you, that feeds all kinds of things that we're not consciously aware of. And basically, you know, of course, society doesn't run on, atomized individuals scattered all over. We get together, we have groups, we organize. That's what we're good at. That's what's kept the human race alive for so long. But under the aegis of government, no. And you'll see why when you read that book. And it's just wonderful. And it aligns with Marx's work. It aligns with human freedom. It is the essence of human freedom and what's standing in our way. So
Oh,
that's something I
fantastic.
recommend. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm excited.
And
That's a new one for me.
I
What
wanted
is
to mention, I would love to come on any shows with you you'd like to do like that. To have that perspective that people can draw from and work things out. That's what it's all about.
It is. It is what it's all about, and that's more of what I'm seeing my work is meant to be. Thank you, Scott. I so appreciate your time. Sending you good hug to your family and all the best. Thank you. Thank you. All right,
You're so
everyone.
welcome and
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Be sure to subscribe, folks. Share this video. Let's get this out there. We'll see you next time.